Thanks for joining us on the conversation. Right now, we switch gears to all the stories in Ethiopia, where the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, has appointed Getachew Reda, the spokesperson of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, as the head of an interim administration in the Tigray region. This move represents a significant step forward in the peace agreement signed on November 2, 2022, which ended the two-year conflict between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. In a Twitter message posted on March 23, 2023, the Prime Minister's office announced that the interim administration will remain in place until elections are held for the region. The war between Ethiopia and Tigray region had escalated into a full-scale conflict in November 2020, causing millions of people to displace and flee to neighboring countries like Sudan. The African Union-led peace talks were held in South Africa in October 2022, which resulted in a peace deal on November 3, 2022. The war has resulted in several issues, including a United Nations investigation into allegations of human rights abuses by the Eritrean army against Tigrayan civilians. On March 22, 2023, Ethiopia and Eritrea criticized the U.S. State Department's report on the conflict as defamatory and inflammatory. Additionally, there have been calls for the Ethiopian government to lift media restrictions as the investigation continues. And now join us for this conversation, we have Seyum Berhi, a member of the Tigray Diaspora Council, Tigray Ethiopia. He joins us from Tigray Ethiopia. We also have Meaza Gebremedin, international relations expert and human rights advocate, also joining us from Tigray in Ethiopia. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you very much. One correction, I am actually here as someone from the war-torn part in Tigray, rather than representing any entity. I just want to be very clear about that. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, thank you so much. So first of all, talking as an individual entity, I mean, how are things going since the peace deal in November? I mean, we had in October, there was a peace deal in South Africa. How have things been generally concerning the aid in Tigray and, of course, the displacements of arms in Tigray? What exactly is the situation at the moment?
I guess the Ghanaians have been silent. That's a very good news. The drones are not destroying clinics and innocent civilians, the Air Force. So peace, I'm not quite sure. But absence of war in itself is a big deal for us, for the people who have been suffering. So kind of good news, but it should not be exaggerated. And I do want to make one correction. Tigray would not accept Viceroy. The Prime Minister had been promised by his mother that he would be a king, but we have no king in Ethiopia, and he cannot appoint. The Pretoria Agreement stated very clearly the federal government and TPLF would negotiate and agree on the temporary administration. That's what happened. He did not appoint, but he likes to say that. His media likes to say that. What are we going to do? His dream of kingdom is still in his head, I think. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, so before we go into this temporary administration that brought in Getachew Reda, first of all, a background of let's pick your brains on what exactly happened that led to the conflict between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray region. What were exactly the main factors that were driving this conflict?
Unfortunately, what I heard you say about the criticism of the United States, every dictator in the world criticizes the United States. They don't agree with us meaning Americans. So let me start with that. I don't blame them for blaming the United States because the United States is asking for humanitarian access, for democratic principles, and basic human rights. Now, what happened? Many people have interpretation of what has happened. No matter what started the conflict, where it went was irresponsible of the federal government to invite a foreign country to completely disseminate part of their own nation and killing women and children. It was out of control, basically because of the Prime Minister of Ethiopia wanted to control everything, everybody, including his media, including faith leadership. So this was not Abiy's war alone. He had the whole public convinced, brainwashed, and lied about it. So it just went out of control. It's not a normal, there is no civilized war, but this was crazy war. You cannot use drones and destroy clinics in your own country. That's what he did. That's what his government did, man.
But why did he do that? Why did Abiy Ahmed do that? What was his reason?
I think there was not open obedience from leadership in Tigray. They're very independent-minded, very principle-minded. The federal government, the federal constitution gives them the power to administer their own state. So the key was they ran an election. Prime Minister Abiy said you cannot run an election. He used an excuse of coronavirus, COVID, not to run his own election. And yet he said, no, you will not. The Tigrayan government went ahead and did it. He said it was illegitimate. And yet, later on, before COVID went away, he ran an election, a sham election. So it was inconsistent. So it was the election that the Tigray government conducted and won fairly and squarely. But the prime minister could not bless it because they were running out of his control. So it's all about control.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring in Miaza into this conversation. And we're still looking about incidents that led to this Ethiopia-Tigray region war. We've had the peace deal in October and in November, and they call for disarmament of the Tigray region and supply of Aets. Now, Miaza, what is the true status currently? I mean, we also have the fact that the Tigray People's Liberation Front has once again been, the terrorist designation has been lifted. How has it affected peace in Tigray or brought about peace in Tigray?
Thank you for having me. It's very important to mention that although the guns have been silenced to a degree following the cessation of hostilities agreement signed in Pretoria in November of last year, a majority parts of Tigray still remain under the illegal occupation of invading forces, forces from Eritrea as well as from the Amhara region. And to add to that, the cessation of hostility hasn't fully materialized because there are still hundreds of thousands of people of Tigray origin illegally languishing in interim and concentration camps across Ethiopia, and people in Tigray still haven't received full humanitarian assistance that was promised to them according to the cessation of hostility agreement that was signed. So looking at all of this, the Tigray administration seems to hold its end of the bargain. However, the Ethiopian government led by the fascist Abiy Ahmed is still to materialize on its promises. So while the guns have been silenced to a degree, the people of Tigray are still suffering with Eritrean and Amhara forces deep in their homes.
Now that we have Getachew Reda, can you provide us more information, Miaza, before I go into Seyum, more information about his appointment as the head of interim administration in Tigray? Now, it's been viewed by different people as a way forward to bringing peace between Ethiopia and Tigray region. For you, looking at the background of Getachew Reda, do you feel this is the way forward?
Getachew is a formidable leader. He's a leader that has shown his capacity throughout his tenure as a politician, not only in Tigray, but also in Ethiopia. However, what we really need to understand here is that the root cause of the Tigray genocide isn't the identity of the politicians. It's rather the image or the idea of Ethiopian state building process. The Abiy Ahmed's group are hell-bent on having a unitarist state that doesn't recognize the innate differences Ethiopian nation and nationalities have. However, the people of Tigray are determined to have their right self-administration respected according to the constitution and principles of democracy. So despite who is leading Tigray, as long as the federal government is not willing to accept the people of Tigray's right self-determination and respect their territorial integrity, I'm afraid conflict could erupt at any time.
Okay, so I wonder if you feel the same way. I mean, we have Getachew Reda who will lead the interim administration. Now, how will it be structured and governed? What kind of support do you think it will receive from the central government in Addis Ababa? And first of all, do you believe that they will respect the territorial integrity of Tigray with this interim administration? Sorry, I want to say you too. Yes, go on, please.
I think Maaza was right. This war was not against TPLF. This war was against the people of Tigray. The mothers, the children were not TPLF members, and yet he was bombing them with drones. So there is a fundamental problem. even if TPLF leadership and Abiy agree on certain things, Abiy have shown, irrespective of anybody becomes a leader, the Tigrayan people seem to be his problem. I do not understand that mind, but it is because the result shows he have animosity about the people. Why would you bomb a children's daycare? Why would you bomb hospitals and schools if it was TPLF leadership? Now, Getachew is a formidable politician, he's a very strong leader, so he could lead if he was left to lead. The place I was born and grew up is still under Eritrea. And guess who else is right there dancing and singing with them? The Ethiopian Federal Military. And the Western Tigray is still under the Amhara militia. So the Ethiopian federal government, Abiy, has agreed on paper in Pretoria and Nairobi, but he's not implementing just a little bit. He's not bombing, but he's not letting food go in freely. You know what? The first thing they allowed Tigray to enter Tigray was beer, not food. This tells you what kind of a sick mind is leading the Ethiopian government. So Abiy, is he ready for peace? I don't believe so. The war can start at any time because he is simply, the Tigrayan military has surrendered heavy machinery, heavy weapons. What has the Ethiopian government done? Nothing yet. So if Abiy wants peace, we can get peace because the people of Tigray want peace. They're working for it. They have done their part. Ethiopia has not. Eritrea, a foreign country, the killing, the abuse, the destruction continues way after the peace agreement. So you figure if the Ethiopian government and Eritrean government really want peace, or they are forced to do a bit of it by the United States. Thank God for that.
Now, earlier on, there were human rights abuses allegations on both sides, both the TPLF and also the Ethiopian military government. Now, earlier on, so you mentioned that Tigrayan people is Abiy Ahmed's problem. First of all, Miaza, I want you to explain on that if you actually agree with his thoughts. And then what specific allegations of human rights abuses are being investigated by the United Nations?
It's clear that the Ethiopian government is hell-bent on exterminating the people of Tigray, which is why right after the genocidal war began, we were sounding the alarm about a genocide looming against the people of Tigray, because the intent to exterminate Tigrayans as whole has been expressed throughout the media campaigns that were led by the Ethiopian government using its mouthpieces, including the National Broadcasting Agency. And there are also multiple evidences that clearly show the patterns of killing that were intended in order to ensure that the Tigrayan woman doesn't continue to reproduce and the Tigrayan ethnicity doesn't continue as an identity. So yes, I do believe that the Ethiopian government sees the people of Tigray as an enemy because they are the ones who have been persistently calling for their right self-determination to be respected, and not form a unitarist Ethiopia that doesn't respect people's democratic rights self-administration. Having said that, the people of Tigray and our leadership have been calling for an independent investigation that would be led by the UN. Even if there are allegations against our forces, the Tigray Defense Forces, the people of Tigray are ready and willing to cooperate with the UN group of experts. However, the Ethiopian government has been doing everything in its power to ensure that, one, that this group of experts doesn't get instituted by the UN. However, we, through endless advocacy work and through some brave European countries, the Independent Investigation Committee has been established. However, the Ethiopian government continues to try to block budget, to try to terminate its mandates, and also now they haven't given any kind of access to Tigray for this investigation committee. So the committee is not really allowed to go to the ground and investigate the war crimes and crimes against humanity that we believe are genocide are investigated. However, we have been trying to cooperate with different rights groups and continue to call for for an extension of this investigation committee so that there is justice and accountability rendered to the victims, not only to ensure that the victims have justice, but also to ensure that there is no another cycle of violence, because you cannot really have a lasting peace without accountability and justice. So the people of Tigray, our leadership and our advocacy continues to call for an independent investigation. However, the Ethiopian government is hell-bent on blocking that investigation because they know if investigators are allowed to go into Tigray and investigate what has happened in the past 2+ years, there is enough evidence to prove that the Ethiopian government and its allies have committed a state-sponsored genocide against the people of Tigray.
Now, talking about the Ethiopian government blocking investigation, does this have anything to do with the media corps we're seeing so far? I mean, you've had allegations of media restrictions. What exactly is going on concerning the media corps? And is this also the plan by the Ethiopian government to try and block investigations? Sayo, I want your reaction to that.
Absolutely. Why else would you not allow legitimate international media into Tigray? Why else would you not allow UN, for God's sake, to come investigate? I will add to what my sister said. The Tigrayan people, if there is any accusation against TDF, they're willing to, whoever has been raping, killing children, destroying property, should be accountable. We have no problem. We're very confident that our fighters did not. If they did, they should be punished like anybody else. Now, the Amhara militias, the Eritrean military, the Ethiopian military, the international media, even without going in, have put few facts on the media. Now, the Ethiopian government might be evil, but they're not stupid. They don't want the media to come in and tell the truth. Their media is controlled by the Ethiopian government. They were part of the genocide, insisting, just look at Rwanda. All they did was a radio station calling them cockroaches. In Ethiopia, they did 10 times more than that at every media, calling them hyenas, destroying Ethiopia. So even the public, even the bishops, the Christian, the Muslim leaders were standing with Abiy to destroy Tigrayans. Okay. This is an embarrassment in history. This is a fact.
All right. Now, Miasa, quickly, with all these allegations about the Ethiopian government, why would Getachew Reda accept this appointment for an interim administration when you supposedly believe that there will be no freedom to respect the territorial integrity of Tigray? Why is Getachew Reda having a negotiation with Abiy Ahmed?
I think in order for people to understand that question, it's really important that they know how hard it was to fight against an Ethiopian state and then so many other countries that were backing the Ethiopian administration. Tigray is home to less than or more than 10 million people. It is a region that has been historically marginalized, with no international access or with no financial support. It didn't have any allies. It was only Tigrayans that were fighting against these invading forces left and right. And mind you, 2+ years of complete 360-degree blockade without access to humanitarian aid. And at some point, you have to stand and ask yourself, what am I fighting for? Is this fight really worth it when your people are dying of starvation, lack of medication, despite your bravery on the battleground? If you don't have anything to feed to your people, as a politician and as a leader, I would assume you have to stand, take a moment and ask. And I believe after so much deliberation and because of the pressure that was coming from so many international actors, including the US government, the Tigrayan leaders have been forced to make very, very painful concessions and sign the Pretoria Agreement. And according to the agreement, the people of they are tasked with establishing an interim administration that will oversee the transitional period until another constitutional election is held in Tigray and another government is reestablished. So I think it's really important that people understand the level of damage that has been incurred against the people of Tigray. Ethiopia has fully and completely destroyed all public infrastructure that was established in the past 30+ years in Tigray. We have lost over 1 million people and our women have been raped. And the international community has been standing ideally by us. All of this has been done onto us by the Ethiopian government, its allies from Eritrea, UAE, and so many other countries. So our leaders had to make a very painful concession in order to see if they can save whatever is left of Tigray. But that is not because
Niaza.
Tigray are weak. It's
We
because of the
definitely,
pressure.
we definitely understand your position and our thoughts with the people of Tigray. We do hope that peace comes back to that particular region. Thank you so much, Miaza Gebremedin, for joining us, and of course, Sayim Berhe for joining us on this conversation. We'll keep our focus on Tigray and see that peace is restored there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
This is where we'll draw the curtains for today's edition on the conversation on the first half. We dealt situations in Nigeria where the national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, Yocha Ayu, has been suspended at the ward level. We just finished conversations now in Ethiopia where an interim administration has been appointed by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed. But it seems it is not over yet. He still needs to come back to Tigray. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. To join me again on Wednesday for another edition of The Conversation. I am Rita Amodia. Many thanks for watching.